What's up, everyone, and welcome back to another episode here on Real Resilience with Matthew Lastalia, me, your host. This is where we talk about strategies of resilience and tactics and techniques that you can implement right now to lead a more fulfilling life, to find that obstacles aren't something to dread, but something to almost look forward to. And so we look at ways to shift mentality and look to find additional motivation through the obstacles that we encounter. Today, I actually wanted to discuss a recent poll that I had put out regarding the values and motivational drivers for people in the workplace. I had actually put this poll out in several places. If you guys want to follow along and be able to kind of see these and respond to them and communicate with me, you can check out the Real Resilience Facebook group, the Matt Lastalia Inc. Facebook page, my personal Facebook page. I'm cool with that too. Just all Matthew Lastalia, you'll see. It's pretty straightforward. And then an exciting place to actually look and to connect with me is my LinkedIn profile, where you can find me under Matthew Lastalia. It's actually a great place to connect because there you can see the work that I'm doing with businesses and helping them to strengthen their culture through resiliency and establishing meaningful connections while you're there. Because for me, I have come to believe that the resilience practice for us as individuals is extremely important. And if I actually start to focus on resilience in the workplace, then I'm starting to focus on an area where most of us spend more of our waking hours in the workplace than we do at home. So if we're able to shift that, able to shift our mentality and able to find more motivation and kind of pursue our purpose, regardless of what it is that we're actually doing, to expand our motivation and to become more productive and more fulfilled with our work, then we're going to bring that home with us. We're going to bring that sense of fulfillment home. We're going to come home with a smile and not kind of just purely drained from the day. Because while work can be draining in and of itself, even if you're behind a computer all day, you could be mentally drained by the time that you get home. And so you don't have to also be emotionally drained. You want to have your emotional tank filled, if not filled up even higher, because you are at work, because of those meaningful connections and that sense of belonging that you have while you're there. And then that kind of transfers to the family. It doesn't kind of transfer, it certainly transfers. You come home with that full emotional, or at least 3/4 tank, full emotional fuel tank that you have, and that is there for you with the people that you love, whether it be your spouse and your kids or your friends or whatever the case may be. You want to have that on reserve. And so implementing these kind of practices and shifting our focus to kind of look in the workplace, I think it really helps us to be able to lead a more fulfilling life, not just at work, but be able to give us the capacity to live an even more fulfilling life when we're home. As for me, for those of you that are new to the show, I know there's a lot of you out there. I am a former Master Resilience trainer for the Army. I did that for about 5.5, 6 years. And now I am the Chief Human Resilience Strategist for a company called Resilient Talent Solutions. And this is a business that I launched in Indiana to further expand my work with the businesses that we were just talking about. So, with all of that out of the way, let's dive into it. Let's look at this poll, right? So, what I did is I had this article and this report that I found from a place called Glint Inc. GLINTINC. And this was published in May of 2021. And so it's not, we're almost a year old, but it was an interesting look at the shift going into the pandemic and then kind of through the pandemic of how the drivers and the workplace drivers for employee well-being. The report is called the Employee Well-being Report, and they looked at these drivers for employees, and so these kind of principled or these values that drive people. And so what I did is I put out, and for those of you that participated in the poll, you already know. But what I did is I took the top 4, and honestly, I did that just because. So the article laid out the top 10, but I did the top 4 because LinkedIn, apparently, when you do a poll, only allows you to get 4 options. So I took the top 4 from this report, and I scrambled them up, and I didn't tell the people what order they actually came in the report, because I was curious what people actually felt like now. So what I want to do is go ahead and give you the results of the poll, and then we're going to contrast that with what we saw from this report, and then we're going to discuss. So the top 4 that I had put up there, and this is the list, the order in which I put them in, so it's not the actual order per the report itself, but it is support for well-being, belonging, opportunities to learn and grow, and organizational values, right? And so it's like, which one of these is essentially most important for you when considering the organization that you work for? And so for a lot of the stuff that I've been reading and listening to, I've been real wrapped around the axle, not intrinsically, not from my own gut sense of things. I was drawn towards organizational values. That's what I thought. If I were to make a guess as to what people would have said, it would have been that. And it turns out it wasn't that. It was that got absolutely 0 votes across any of the platforms where voting took place, which was really interesting and kind of eye-opening. Now, my gut told me, and where I had been focusing a lot of my own work recently in the most recent keynote speech that I've been working on, is focusing on the sense of belonging. Like, if we're taking this and looking at it from a sense of kind of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? So the way that Maslow's hierarchy of needs works is basically he gives you these different human needs in order to gain a sense of fulfillment. And each rank, it's usually like a pyramid, and each row, the pyramid's divided up into kind of 5 rows, 5 sections. And so the most base of it is physiological, and that is food, water, shelter, like your ability to survive, essentially. So you need these physiological components in order to live, right? And the way that the hierarchy works is that it's not that it's nice to have each one of these, it's actually required to move on to that next step, to that next row, that next section. So once you have that pinned down, once you know that you have your food is taken care of, and your water and your shelter, like those things are secure, then you can look at the next row, which is a sense of security. And so this can be like physical security, like protection, especially early on in hunter-gatherer days, from like invading tribes or, people trying to steal your food and stuff like that. So security in that sense, where you're secure in your person, you don't feel like you're in survival mode. And then it's also a sense of security in other things too, like employment. Like there's a different sense of security that you have if you're an employee working. So like, take it from my example from myself. So my very first job was working in a restaurant. I worked at this place called Lansky's. Now it's run and managed, and I think it's might be fully owned by a good friend of mine, Chris Hoffman. And so there I was an hourly employee. There was no contract as far as like, I'm going to work for you for this amount of time and this, that, or the other. It's basically like, we're hiring you for this amount of money per hour, and you're going to work for us. And that was pretty much it. And so they could have fired me essentially whenever they want. There may be laws in the place. I don't know if there was like like they were required to provide a 2-week notice, but at any rate, that would probably be the minimum that was there. I later became a mechanic where I worked on flat rate, and that was almost like a commission job. And so another thing, it's you get a job, it comes in, and say you get, you have to change four tires and do an alignment. Okay, the four tires is going to be almost an hour, and then the alignment's going to be like 1.2 hours, and so you are getting paid an hourly rate. And regardless if it takes you 5 hours to do that job or if it takes you 45 minutes to do that job, you're going to get paid the 2.2 hours for the tires and the alignment. Which brings a different sense of security, right? Like, you are almost, so I made way more money, but I was way less secure in the sense that it wasn't even up to my boss whether or not I was going to get paid. It was up to the whims of people coming in with their cars. And then all of those cars, when they come in, they're getting divided up amongst all the mechanics. And so that actually spurred the next career move, because I was there during the 2007, 2008, and 2009 kind of crash, and I saw cars stop coming in. And so I would be sitting there not getting paid for hours. And that was part of the gig too. It's not like you could just leave. You had to be there. And so I'm there for hours, not working, not getting paid, and just sitting around. And that was not really sustainable. So I ended up joining the military. And that was my first time playing around with a contract. And essentially, like a salary based type of pay where you're going to get paid this amount, regardless. Like, it doesn't matter what you're doing or whatever. The only times that your pay changes is when you change rank or as you stay in longer. It's like every other year you get a raise to kind of keep up with inflation. You also get different entitlements and stuff there too, like basic allowance for housing based on where you live. So, when I was stationed near DC, it was a lot. And when I was stationed in Georgia, it was not that much, right? It's not as much as DC, right? It was less. It's commensurate with the area that the post is located. So you have all these other things too. But it was the point is that there was a different level of security because you didn't really have to worry about being fired. It's very hard to be fired from the military. You can do it. I assisted people in the process of being fired from the military, but it's you have to mess up either like really bad, like illegal actions, or you have to perform so poorly for so long that you eventually get removed. So it's very difficult, to say the least. So there's a lot of security there, which is actually part of the problem with military people transitioning, like soldiers and airmen and service members transitioning to the civilian world, because oftentimes you're not walking into another job that's like that. But I digress. So essentially what I'm saying is that, like, there's different levels of security in your job depending on the situation of your job. But that is in that second row of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And then the next row above that, and this is where I've been putting a lot of focus on, because I've been spending a lot of time reading about the Great Resignation, and that is essentially this mass. For those of you who are not familiar, it's this mass exodus of people from their jobs. And it's not just people retiring, it's not just people getting fired. This is the focus on the Great Resignation, hence the name, is people quitting and choosing different jobs, and oftentimes choosing different industries in which to work, things that they find more fulfilling, for those people that have the kind of capacity to have been able to do that. And with the shift in the pandemic and the fact that our technology was where it was at the time, we had, for people that were working kind of office jobs, this look at remote work became essential for a lot of that. And because of that, like the country and a lot of the world was looking at remote work as a primary way to kind of keep the wheels of our modern society running. And so with that, companies then could start hiring people from really far away in order to perform these jobs if they found and identified jobs through this process that could be done fully remotely, why not? And that was actually the way that I transitioned out of the military, was into a 100% remote job that was for a company that was in London. And so, like, that was incredible. And I don't know that they would have been open to something like that prior to the pandemic happening. So it was interesting shifts that took place there. And so when I was looking at this and considering why people are leaving and what they're looking for, and how much of a risk they are once they become kind of migratory, like, do they take on this migratory nomadic kind of mindset and say, like, is there a person that quits their job and is looking for that other job? Are they more likely to quit that next job and kind of go in this kind of job hopping situation, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing. If you have the ability and the security to be able to do that enough to maintain the things that you need to, the things you feel comfortable with in your personal life, then by all means, follow your heart. But I think what a lot of companies either started or didn't start to do was start to look at that next level of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? If there are multiple companies, and the amount of companies that are now at an individual's disposal in order to that are available to them for hire will fulfill those bottom two ranks, right? They'll fulfill their ability to house, like, through employment, through security of employment, and through security of that they know that they're going to get paid. They're going to be able to pay for the food, water, and shelter, and have that security and employment. And so if they're able to receive these kind of offers or this kind of availability from an even wider array of sources, and we're seeing people leave because of that, what's going to get people to stay? And so for me, my thought was, okay, we'll look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs and look at belonging, right? That's the next level, like feeling like you're a part of something. This can be your family, it can be friends, it can be your cohort at work. And I think that was one of the things that I truly believe that is one of the things that companies need to look at now in order to create an environment. It's that next step in order to keep people there, is make them feel like they're a part of the team. Don't just make them feel like they're a part of a team, make them a part of a team. Take positive action to have people feel like they are one of the organization and not just another employee who works there, goes in, punches a clock, does their work, and then heads home. And so interestingly, with that, belonging was tied for the most votes. It was actually tied with, so that was not, it was surprising to me, but it was also a confirmation in the things that I was actually feeling in my gut, rather than just the pure analytical mind. Like the thing that made sense to me, both on a gut level and looking at, the psychology behind it, like that makes sense, that belonging would strike so high. It was actually tied with opportunities to learn and grow, which outbeat the support for well-being. And so I think opportunities to learn and grow is crucial. If you don't feel like you have a path upward in the company, or even just it doesn't even necessarily have to be like opportunities for promotions, but opportunities to advance even in your role, like advance. So I was in sales, and so for that company that was in London, and had I stuck with them, my role, I had the opportunity not necessarily to rank up necessarily, but I had the opportunity to receive more responsibility, to expand from, and I actually did. I expanded my initial work of focusing in the United States to focusing on the United States and the rest of the world, essentially. And that was because of performance, and that they were open to that, which made it, enticing and exciting. And so, and when you are working, I think so that's the opportunity to grow, opportunity to learn, which is the other part of that. If you're working with people, I think it's so incredibly important for us to be able to have mentors, to be able to have people around us that are kind of doing the same thing, but are crushing it and have been crushing it for a long time, and can kind of help us along the way. Even if we've been doing it for a while, having other people around us that can help facilitate us to learn more strategies and more techniques and be able to fulfill our duties even better. I think that we all appreciate that, when it's presented in a way that isn't demeaning. So So that was it, right? So it was tied top two: belonging and opportunities to learn to grow, followed by support for well-being, and organizational values. So the support for well-being is interesting just because so general. Like how people define well-being is so broad that I didn't really like that one, but it was legitimately in the top four of the report. So now, if we look at the actual report, right? So those numbers I just gave you, those were all from my surveys that I conducted. So now if we look at the report, we can look at the top four, and the top one was actually opportunities to learn and grow. So that actually matched. And the interesting thing about this report is that it shows you from 2020 to 2021 the not just the ranking of those, but it also shows you the shift of ranking. So like for number one, opportunities to learn and grow was moved 8 spaces, 8 values above where it was before, up to number one. And so this was the number one thing valued. And for full transparency, they surveyed a lot more people than I did. So it was something like, oh, did I put it down? Okay, yeah, I did. It was 629 companies, over 275,000 job postings from 375 organizations around the world. And I'll just say that I didn't have that many. So and not quite the 275,000 job postings that were assessed. So there's a lot of data. They're pulling from a very large database. But yeah, so that was cool. It's interesting to see that people valued that so greatly, the opportunity to learn and grow. And that happened during like the heat of the pandemic, from like May 2020 to May 2021. Number two was a sense of belonging, right? So that's pretty cool that my survey and this survey both aligned in the sense that they were tied for number one on mine, but they were number one and number two. And belonging had it moved up 4 spaces in from where it was a year prior in May of 2020. Then organizational values actually came in, where mine got no votes. Organizational values actually moved up 5 spaces to number 3. So it was number 8 before in May 2020, and it is number 3 now. So organizational values. And so my analytical sense and what I had been reading and learning about actually did have value, or it showed up in data collected, through huge wide surveys. Then the fourth one was support for well-being, and they didn't have enough data to be able to give you a shift placement. I just think that means that they didn't have a solid placement for it in 2020. Just real quick to go through the rest of the top 10. Number 5 was collaboration. That moved up 5 spaces. Number 6 is change adaptation, which didn't have enough data. Number 7 was initiative, which didn't have enough data for movement. Number 8 was customer focus, which is interesting. That it's interesting that somebody would put that as their number one for working for a company. But it's very selfless, which is cool to see. That made top 10. Number 9 was continuous improvement. That actually dropped down 2 spaces. And then number 10 was performance feedback, which moved up 5 places. So it was 15th before, a year prior. Which I think is crucial. I think that's so important, to be able to provide effective feedback to people based on their performance and how they're doing. And because how do you expect someone to get better? If you have somebody that's not performing at the level that you want, how do you expect them to perform better if you're not clearly communicating that feedback to them? And if somebody is performing really well and you want them to continue to perform very well, or continue on a trajectory to perform even better, how can they reasonably be expected to do that without you giving them feedback like, this is what you did that was really good. I really like how you approach these tasks. It seems like you did a good job managing this team in this way, right? Getting specific. I think that's so crucial. And interestingly, so I looked at what some of the people from Glint said about this, kind of their assessment on what was going on. So I wanted to give you that before I dove into mine. So this People Science Senior Consultant, that is the title that I don't know if she gave herself or the company gave her or what, but it's people science senior consultant. So people science, which is cool. I like people science. It's what I'm into. But she said, quote, in the past, work culture was shaped heavily by in-person interactions, water cooler chats, shared meals, team retreats, and the like. So when the pandemic not only stripped away physical interaction, but also threatened our safety, the less tangible drivers of work culture, such as growth opportunities, belonging, and values, they became much more important to employees. It's an interesting assessment. I mean, all of those things may be true. I don't know if they drive that way. But it's not an inaccurate, necessarily factual thing to say, I suppose. And then when I dove in a little bit further to Glint's kind of model and the way that they look at things, I saw that they had people success elements. So this is Glint's people success elements. And there are, I think there's 4 of them, maybe 5. So it's purpose, clarity, connection, well-being, and empowerment and growth. And so in a quick rundown of those purposes, about how your work serves others and has meaningful impact. And I think that's crucial. I think that kind of ties into the organizational values a little bit. Kind of organizational values will kind of undergird all of these. And so I think that organizational values being number 1 is it makes sense that organizational values would be number 1 across the board. And I don't know if you guys can hear, but that's my puppies. They're like, Dad, what are you doing? Here, I'll actually let them in. Come here, puppies. Oh, Lucifer. So, Billy's a good boy. You might be able to see the top of him. Oh, yeah, there he is. So you can see his tail. Oh, there's Moose. Hey, Harper, baby. Oh, what a good girl. Hello, honeys. Yeah, they're my 2 Newfoundlands. Oh, so good. Oh, hello. Oh, hi. Okay. All right, that's enough. Plots. Oh, it's a very good girl. Moose, Plots. Hey. Moose, Plots. Oh, that's a good boy. Yeah, they're good. Sorry for that minor disturbance, but I love them, so I like to hang out with them in here. And if you hear an occasional whine, yawn, like those couple just happen, if you hear that, that's them. So, having your purpose, like I said, it's how your work serves others and it has a meaningful impact. So to me, what I've been focused on so much is communication. I think that's the most crucial thing. And so all of these things that they're about to say are huge, but they mean nothing without communication. And so if your work serves others and it has a meaningful impact, how are you communicating that both to your clients, which I imagine that's how you have clients, and have people patronizing your business. But it's how are you communicating it with your talent, with your organization? Is your purpose clear with them, and is their purpose clear with you? This communication should be happening back and forth. You should understand what is driving the people that you're bringing in to be a part of your team. And if you're a person that's coming in to be a part of a team, you should look for opportunities to communicate that, to ask your leadership about the purpose, their higher purpose. If they're not outwardly communicating that with you, seek it, and then be ready to communicate what your purpose is and how you align with theirs. The next was clarity. So is knowing about what success looks like and what to prioritize. Again, we talked about this a little bit before in performance feedback, right? So that's part of it, being clear on what you expect to be done. This is where you need to, I'm going to skip connection and well-being just for a second. I'm going to tie this in with empowerment, because clarity can often be used and discussed in the sense of like, this is what we need to get done. And this is how it ties to our purpose, right? That's really good communication. Now, even like top level communication is almost restricting the part where you're communicating, this is how I want it done. And that's what goes into empowerment. Empowerment is that freedom and flexibility to own your own work and make decisions about how you best direct your talent and effort. That's directly from Glenn. And so I think that's huge. I think you tie those together in that way, and that's really important. Connection's clutch. It's, about having these high quality relationships with colleagues. I think that's where the sense of belonging comes from, and that's why I think that that's so important. And interesting, there's actually so you could there's a way to do this that they talked about. It's on lead LEAD bot, and it's this like add-on for MS Teams where it essentially randomly assigns you with a connection partner every other week or something like that, and basically and so this could be anyone. This could be like a new hire with a CEO, or somebody from marketing with somebody with IT, and it just brings you together, and it's like, okay, well, on this day you have an appointment where basically like you're gonna go and talk to them, like, and it be over Teams, and you just communicate and you just spend some time talking with each other, and that helps to more firmly establish that sense of belonging and that sense of connection between people. Another great practice is kind of a question of the day exercise. And so they gave examples of, you could use silly questions to even somewhat serious questions, and you just kind of you curate the setting and the dynamic of that based on what it is that you guys want to talk about. So it might be better if you're just starting to implement these things, to start off a little bit light, like, oh, what is your most embarrassing moment from high school or something, or what is your, what was the silliest thing that you dressed up as, in Halloween. And then you can kind of shift into deeper topics later if you so wish, but the deeper topics and the things that get a little bit uncomfortable, which we will get into in just a little bit here, that is where a lot of growth opportunities are. But well-being, so this is where they give a little bit of their definition of well-being. Quote, well-being is about giving people what they need to feel safe, successful, and valued at work while treating everyone with dignity, fairness, and equity. A different team member leads each session, and we gather to talk about pressing topics from employees. And this is so that part is kind of like a strategy. That last part's kind of a strategy that they use, and they're pressing this to say this needs to be employee driven and not HR driven. And that's how you get more authenticity and more buy-in, is when it's not being kind of pushed from above. The thing that I don't like about this is equity, because I think that equity and fairness are actually in direct opposition to one another, and that may be objectionable, and that's fine. We don't have to agree, actually, on everything, it turns out. But I think equity leans more towards the equality of outcome versus the equality of opportunity. I think fairness focuses on, giving everyone an opportunity to do something, but equity would say that, the outcome from everyone needs to be the same, and that's just not really possible. So, but we won't go any further into that. If you guys are interested, I can do a whole thing on equity versus equality and fairness, and we can do that, but I don't think that it's particularly illuminating, especially for the topics that we're diving into today. So, we talked about empowerment a bit. And so, okay, this was really neat. They had a really neat idea about, what do they call it? Well-being Fridays. And so essentially what the strategy was here was take Friday and make it, it's not that it's not a work day, it's that it's what do you need to do today, the last day of the work week, in order to feel at your best, and really the way they framed it is in order to go into Monday, kicking and screaming. No, I guess not kicking and screaming. It's the opposite, like hooping and hollering. There we go. What actions can you take on Friday in order to create the best Monday possible? And so for some people, that might be sitting down with a meaningless day and just working on deliverables and just hammering out products and whatever it is that they need to do. For other people, it might be a day completely away from the computer and just talking with people at the office, or catching a yoga session or whatever, but it's kind of a your call kind of a day to do what you need to do. You might be a little bit behind, so you might have to really focus in on work, and then getting all that work done and having it uninterrupted will make you feel way better going into the weekend, and even better going into Monday. So I thought that was a really cool idea. I actually really liked that. I'm gonna play around with that a bit and see what I can do with that. And then growth, learning new skills and diversifying experiences. And so for me, a lot of this is about, playing with different methods, like looking at different approaches. I think a lot of this is a lot of opportunities for growth can happen. Like I said, they happen through almost through conflict. It's hard to grow without pain. We don't even get to do that with our bodies. We have growing pains where you have that crazy sensation in your legs, or you just can't control it, and you're like, oh, it's just so uncomfortable. Well, it's the same thing with anything. Any skill that you have now was most likely not obtained without a sense of discomfort. And a lot of times that discomfort can just be being confronted with approaches that to problem solving, or approaches to work that you thought are silly, but you're sitting and listening to them anyway. And you can actually end up finding, a diamond in the rough, so to speak. Now, the problem that I found myself with this is when I actually dove into it was that there's a lot of kind of references to safe spaces and creating this safe work environment. And it's not that I have a problem with a safe working environment. I don't think that's a problem at all. I think that the theme, or the idea of a safe space can actually be counterproductive, and might have some potential intrinsic problems to it when I'm thinking about it from a workplace environment. I'm actually curious what you guys think when it comes to this. So please, find me on the Facebook group, or find me on LinkedIn, and drop me a note and let me know what you think about this, because I'm sure that this is a very diverse audience that we have here, and with a diverse background, and I'm curious to hear your guys' thoughts and inputs on this, but I'm going to give you mine. So for me, if the space is safe for one person to communicate, then so if one person is there and they're saying, hey, this is a safe space, you can communicate whatever you want, and you don't have to have any fear of retribution or anything like that. We want to look at kind of what are the second and third orders of doing that. And so in order to really understand it, I wanted to dive in and make sure I truly understood what a safe space was. And it's hard because you could do it, I guess, however you want. But I just went with, I found there's actually an Oxford dictionary definition of it. It says a place or an environment in which a person or category of people can feel confident that they will not be exposed to discrimination, criticism, harassment, or any other emotional or physical harm. Now, we're going to use that as our basis for the rest of this conversation. To me, there are two possible consequences from creating a safe space in your work environment. And that is that the people that are attending a session, like a safe space session, or that are coming together, who are listening to somebody speak in an environment where they are promised, protection from discrimination, criticism, harassment, or emotional or physical harm, there's one or two things they're going to do. They're either going to agree with what that person is saying, or they're going to disagree, right? It's pretty simple, but that is going to happen. You're going to say something that you feel like you need to be in a safe space in order to say. So typically that's not like, man, I like chocolate ice cream. Those aren't the things you're going to be communicating in the safe space. They're going to be things that are a little bit more hot topic, a little bit more risque, so to speak. So the response is, some people are going to agree and some people are going to disagree. And if they agree, then that's not really a problem, right? There's no concern there. And I wholeheartedly agree that there's not a time or a space that I would ever sanction that would allow for harassment or harm or discrimination in the colloquial sense discrimination's a funny one because we all discriminate every day, right? We choose which clothes we're gonna wear. We choose what food we're gonna eat and what food we're not gonna eat. We even do this, with people. Like I'm friends with these people and I'm not friends with these people. And not even looking at it as like groups of people. Like I don't get along with John. I get along with Sam, and so I'm friends. And so I'm discriminating. I'm not going to hang out with John, and I will hang out with Sam if that's the way I said it. But so to me, it's really the question is, what is the basis of the discrimination, right? Is it arbitrary? Is it not merit based essentially? So if I'm saying I don't want to hang out with you because you have red hair, or your skin's too light or too dark, then that is right. That's the discrimination that's not acceptable. And I think that when we use the word discrimination now, that's what we're talking about. And it's just, I want to always be clear and a little bit nuanced with the terms and the things that we're speaking of, because it's not necessarily that black and white, and we need to keep things into perspective. So I think that it's important to look at really what the actions of the discrimination are. If you think about, most likely, if I'm discriminating against something, it just means that I'm not participating with it. Like I'm discriminating against this food means I'm not eating that food. I'm discriminating against all of these clothes means I'm not going to wear those clothes. It kind of falls in line with the idea of tolerance, which I think is also something that is massively confused these days. In the sense that tolerance doesn't mean that I have to enjoy what you enjoy. It doesn't mean that I have to, bless off or agree with your thoughts. It means that I am allowing you space for your thoughts, and to have them and to be able to pursue them. If you practice a different religion than me, like you praying to whatever God you believe in, and me not inhibiting your ability to do that, that's tolerance, right? Like I don't believe it. I don't believe that that's true, but I'm not going to stop you from doing it, right? That's tolerance. It's not like, oh, that's really good. Like I'm so happy that you do that. You can be happy. That's just going like a step above tolerance. That's not tolerance. That's something else. So I think what happens in the safe spaces is where we need to look at is obviously where people disagree. So, and this is where the issue comes in for me with safe spaces, is the space is safe for the person communicating, but it's essentially saying it's not safe for people who are receiving the information who disagree. And you say, well, that's not true, because they can be there and they can disagree, but they're just not allowed to go back to the definition. They're not allowed to discriminate because of the things they find out in there. They're not allowed to criticize or harass or do emotional or physical harm. And now with 90% of that, I agree. I think the things that you find out in there should not be used to say, okay, well, I'm not going to promote this person because they believe this stuff and I don't believe that stuff. You can make that choice, but that's kind of violates the whole purpose of a safe space. Where I think it gets into a problem is where we get into the point of criticism. And I think that the fact that that's laid out as an individual item in there, separate, I think you take that word out and I'm pretty much all in. I'm all about it. But if you can't criticize, and then what you're ending up with is essentially you're going to create tribes, because if this is not mandatory, which I mean, you could make it mandatory, but I think that that's a bad idea. If this is a voluntary session and people are going there and you're not allowed to counter somebody's thoughts or critique their thoughts, all of these are synonyms for criticizing, right? Then you just have to go in there and just listen. Then you are not likely to go in there anymore. And so the people that are going to go there are people that are going to be agreeing with those thoughts, and the people who aren't going to go are people that are not agreeing with those thoughts. And there, in and of itself, you're creating this unnecessary, chasm, the schism in the work, in these different tribes sitting on either side, where like, you can visually identify, like, oh, those are the people that don't show up to the safe spaces where we talk about this stuff. They were there the first time, and then they never showed up again, which means that they don't agree with us, and we're different, and we're separate, so we're not even going to communicate or interact, and you're ruining that sense of belonging that you're trying to create, or that you should be aspiring to create and be a part of when you're in an organization. And I think that's the risk that we run into, and that's the thing that we really need to be careful about. And I think that the thing is that we can avoid this. You can create an environment where people can respond to people in a safe space, but it's just important of kind of how, in a contradictory fashion, it's just important about how you frame the safe space and how you prepare people for what to anticipate in there, and lay out very clear kind of rules and ethics to take into account when you're there. Like, if you have the ability to regulate your emotions and to understand and kind of like read the room and read body language and kind of get a feel for how other people are responding without verbal communication, and you're effective at asking questions, but not making them like loaded questions or harassing questions, just like poking and prodding, trying to tear their thing apart, but being genuine and wanting to learn more. I think that that's a great way to kind of lay out a framework for how to respond to somebody when you don't agree. If you're creating a safe space with the idea that you can communicate safely here, but you also have to acknowledge that people aren't always going to agree with you, and we want to make sure that this is a safe space for them as well. And so in order to create this environment, these are the rules that we're going to follow. So please do communicate, and please do follow these rules. And if we don't, then you need to have like a moderator in there in order to make sure that nothing goes off the rails. And it might be really good for you if you are a leader of an organization, if you're a manager, then it might be good for you to kind of lead by example here, and open up with a thought, and then ask for a contradictory thought, on your beliefs about something, and then to show through the way that you respond what is a great way to respond to those counter points, so to speak. And it's just really hard to do, especially in a situation like that. Like I said, you're not there talking about how much you enjoy peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. You're there because you have something that is a little bit heated, and you want to feel like you can communicate your thoughts on this thing without being ostracized or that you're going to be discriminated against, and all of those things, and feel any sort of harm come your way, any sense of reprisal. So it's going to be heated. It's really hard for some people, especially if they don't do it regularly, to regulate those emotions and to be able to take themselves out of their own brain when they start to see red. They're like, oh, I can't believe they're saying this, and so that's why it's important to have that moderator there, and to kind of lead by example, by you being the person that kind of kicks it off. I think also, so there's another thing, I just don't know if we have time for it. We'll go into it real quick. I don't want to like rush through this, but we don't have a lot of time left. Tips from the Forbes Coaches Council. I thought that this related quite well here. So this is an article written in Forbes. It was written by their Coaches Council. And basically what they were saying is that they were talking about, it was like 15 ways your organization can create a safe space in a divisive world. And I was like, well, that's really pertinent. So they looked at promoting dialogue, clearly letting people know that everyone is valued irrespective of their opinions. Check. Absolutely. Make that clear from the get-go. Build trust. And there's a gentleman, Stephen Covey. I think he's like a speaker, and he's written a book called Speed Trust or something like that. Build Trust with Speed. And he talks about character, competence, and communication are the basis for all trust. So you have to have those three components there. You have to have character, a strength of character. You have to have competence. You have to kind of know what you're talking about, and you have to be able to communicate. And it helps establish that trust. Don't fear the uncomfortable conversation, right? And so my thought on this is, start your sessions off with those organizational values. We've seen that through a huge number of survey results that is number one on the list of drivers in the workplace. So start your session off with those organizational values. Those organizational values should have been discussed in the interview process, so there should be alignment there. But go ahead and make this overt, right? Have attendees state which values that they connect most with and why. These are my thoughts on this, and I think that helps to create a sense of unity and really a kind of a centralized beacon that everyone can go back to say, if you have multiple people talking about one of the organizational values and then later they disagree, like, remember how we agreed on this and like we thought that these values were important? Like, there's still alignment. We still have core beliefs here. We're approaching it from two different ways. But then being able to bring in the organizational value that is kind of most relevant to the disagreement, like your ability to kind of do that and moderate that, that's huge. That can turn this potentially chasm creating event into an opportunity for growth, right? And using those uncomfortable situations to promote a very powerful team building event and to create an even stronger sense of belonging within there. And then another one was foster a practice of gratitude. And so, they've referenced that their science supports emotional and psychological and physical rewards of a consistent gratitude practice. So my thoughts on this is that you can actually adopt this into the meeting opener as well, into a safe space opener. In addition, you can do all this stuff fairly quickly too. You don't have to spend 2 hours in the safe space, but you can do this pretty quick. So the way that there are a bunch of strategies to kind of do public or like group gratitude kind of sessions. One that I developed and that I like is doing 3 different gratitude categories that you as or whoever the moderator is kind of present. So he says, okay, so real quick, everyone here, name something that name something that you are grateful for. And then you get everyone to kind of like, oh, I'm grateful for coffee. Oh yeah, that's great. And everyone kind of laughs, it's all good. I'm grateful for my car because I wouldn't be able to get to work today. I'm grateful for public transit, whatever. And then what person are you grateful for? Kind of go through and get everyone to kind of give a person, like my mom, my brother, whatever, my children. And then what experience are you grateful for? And all of this allows, like, it's almost a team building event in and of itself, because then you get to know what people, and you don't have to get this from every single person, but if you get multiple different people to give answers for each one just real quick, then you are then you're getting to know everyone. It's like they're opening up a little bit, like, oh, okay, these are things that you value. You have a really strong relationship with your grandma. I didn't know that. It turns out that you really enjoy taking the train. I didn't know people took the train to get to work. I always drive every day. And that you went to Hawaii on vacation with your family. And so, like, oh, you like to travel, like to go out and experience new things. Like, I know all of these things about you now because you express them in this kind of real brief, abbreviated gratitude practice at the beginning. And so I think that was all really cool. Like, that was, I think that it's so important for us to be open to these things. And this was actually a practice for me to be open to new things and uncomfortable situations, because going into this, I thought safe spaces were a complete joke and had no place in my life or in any business that I would run, that can be held by people elsewhere. But after reading into it and seeing what was written and then disagreeing with it, but then finding very acute disagreements and identifying ways around it, I'm actually like really excited about the idea of doing like safe space sessions. I wouldn't name it that, just because it has such a charge right now, but I think it's really interesting, and definitely something that I'm looking to incorporate in the businesses that I support, along with my business itself, as I add people to it and things that we'll be looking at doing internally. But it's really cool. Like I said, belonging and opportunities to learn and grow were like tops of the list for both my survey and the very large survey that was done. And a keynote with the difference in those surveys isn't just the size, but is also the time. So now, as we continue through another year, essentially it's April 21st, so almost another year after this report was done, we're seeing those top two still hold. And so opportunities to learn and grow and belonging. And so if you're in a managerial position, in a leadership position, think about these things and think about your latitude and what you're able to do, and how you can incorporate practices that we discussed here today into your organization to foster a sense of belonging and to adopt opportunities for your crew, your team, your department in order to learn and to grow. And I think we covered some of those today, so that's really cool. Thank you guys. I really appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed today's show. If you did, please give me just one more second, and if you wouldn't mind subscribing. That's really huge. It's very important for the channel, very important for what we're doing here, and it will make the world of difference for my ability to continue to operate here and to come back again next week and to be able to help even more people and more businesses look and shift the way that they see obstacles and to turn them into opportunities. Look for opportunities to grow, just like I did today with Safe Spaces. So thank you guys. I appreciate it. Have a wonderful day and have a wonderful rest of your week.